Okay, so we're at the Sporting Car Club. Darryl's Enfield. He's done some beautiful work on that for the starter. That's the air starter. And here's the SCAT. Got all the paraphernalia on it. That's about the air start. Cool.
I'm going to introduce our next guest, and this is how this meeting came. But I did speak to Darryl last year at All British Day. I was sitting there and said, love to get the infield on stage one day. And I had a phone call from Martin, who spoke with the gentleman in our library.
Peter Godfrey.
Peter Godfrey, thank you. And about 15 seconds in the conversation, I said yes. And about 20 seconds in the conversation, I've got a second car, Darryl. So that was the whole good. But thank you, Martin. Please come up and let's hear your story about the SCAT. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Martin Blanchard, and if that name is at all familiar to anyone here in this room, firstly I'd like to apologise. I was a member here some probably 15 odd years ago, and my father Ivan was a member here going back into the 1970s. So he's the one who gave me my love of old cars, so you can blame him. If you get bored with the speech, blame him. It's not really his fault, but blame him anyway. When I was growing up, I was surrounded by various old cars, and one of the projects that was in our family was a 1910 SCAT. Now, when I was very young, all I remember was a bright red painted chassis leaning against a wall with 4 wheels leaned against it. And for a young child, that really wasn't that interesting when there was an A model Ford being restored. I had a 1935 LaSalle that was a playpen in the shed. I used to go in and just open it up and play inside that. Oops, sorry. Lots of cars. When I was 7 years old, my father sold me my first Amel car. I say sold, what it was he actually borrowed $15 out of my money box, and I caught him. So he found that a really good excuse to get out of being on the committee for the Amel car register. So there you go. So next slide, please. So you can see sort of these are some of the cars when I was growing up. The blue Model A Roadster is still with my uncle in Darwin. The town sedan is in my shed. The Amel car did go. Adrian Denman restored that one. And that is me standing in the 1928 Roadster. Going back that far, my Friday nights used to be quite a lot of playing underneath the old original pool table in the old club rooms on Port Rush Road for the Sporting Car Club. So that'll give you some sort of idea of how long we're talking. So back to the SCAT. When I was about 16, I remember my uncle coming down from Darwin, packing the entire thing up and taking it with him up to Darwin. Now he was starting the mechanical side of the restoration, and his plan at the time was to have it running before my grandmother passed. Unfortunately that didn't occur, but for the last 25 years the SCAT has actually been in the back of the 1934 Qantas hangar, which is, if you've been up there and visited, it's sort of half museum, half men's shed. And late last year, or no, probably middle of last year, my uncle hadn't been able to get there and do any work on it for a while. So he was actually asked to move it because they needed the space for the current members who were doing their projects. So not having the space at home, he contacted my father and said, would Martin and Christopher like the SCAT? That was a stupid question. We'd been sort of talking about, for quite some time the idea of a vintage or a brass era speedster. So suddenly to be offered, what was an early brass era car, we were absolutely ecstatic. Next slide. Oh, I caught him. Excellent. Okay. So basically, November last year, 3 generations of our family flew to Darwin to pack up what was left of the SCAT, all the parts that were in, just stacked on shelves in the hangar, put them all into a container and ship them back home to Adelaide. Now, we managed to get the container out of Darwin about 2 days ahead of Cyclone Fina. So that was fortuitous timing, I guess. So one of the things we started while we were waiting for the container was to research the vehicle. Now, all of this we're pretty sure had been done in the 1970s when the car was first obtained. The belief generally is that my grandfather probably paid maybe a carton of long necks for it in the early 1970s. So we started basically from scratch researching the car, and we started with the registration database. Go back one, sorry. This is actually a photograph that we found in between 2 of the original floorboards, and it's a 15 horsepower SCAT located in North Adelaide. We don't know when the photo was taken, but we had to start with identifying the model of the car. Now that actually proved relatively straightforward because the shape of the firewall changed fairly regularly with SCAT. I didn't mention it before, I wasn't going to go too technical with the mark, but SCAT stands for Società Sierrano Automobili Torino. So it's an Italian car, not a lot different to a Fiat, made by the Sierrano brothers in Turin. And I think they started making cars in 1906. No, sorry. They started making cars much earlier than that. The SCAT they started making in 1906, and it continued until it was taken over by Fiat in 1929. One of the identifiable points about the 15 horsepower SCAT, which is what we've got here, is a very low profile on the bonnet. Most of the larger engined cars had a much taller radiator and bonnet, and in 1910 SCAT developed, they replaced the casting of cylinders in pairs with what they called a new monoblock. So if you have a look at the block on this car, it's actually cast in one piece. There is no head. So it makes it really easy to identify. So if we go to the next photo. Okay. So as I said, we were looking at building a speedster, and this is what we actually sort of were looking at as possible designs. The top left is the 1908 SCAT team for the Isle of Man TT, and if you look at the top of the firewall, the scuttle, it's actually rounded. So that was an early feature. The photo below it is Ernesto Sierrano's 1911 Targa Florio winning car, and that has a rectangular shape to the scuttle, which is what we've got here. And by halfway through, sometime during 1911, they actually changed the shape of it again to have a slightly more rounded profile to it. So with the monoblock engine casting and the square scuttle, we know that we have a 1910 or 1911 15 horsepower SCAT. So this is actually how we found it when we arrived in Darwin. They had wheeled it out of the shed for us. I mean, last time we saw it, it didn't have 4 wheels on it. So we arrived there and found it just sitting outside. It's not a lot different in some ways, but so we packed it into a container with all of the parts in bags all around it. So this is where we started doing the research, and what we found was that there were very few 15 horsepower SCATs registered in South Australia. In fact, you can see there are only 3 of them listed there, we did find a few more later on because it depends on how you do the search. If you search for SCAT, you get different results than if you search for S.C.A.T. And the results change again if you add a dot after the last T. Regardless, so this was where we actually got to with our research. And one of the things that was really troubling me was 1910, maybe 1911 car, the first 15 horsepower vehicle listed there as being registered was by the Fire Brigade on the 1st of September 1913. We couldn't work that out. That caused quite a bit of trouble initially. Yeah, next one. It wasn't until a little bit later we found, if you have a look there, at that time, September 1st, 1913, there are 4 Fire Brigade vehicles registered on the same day. So suddenly somebody said, well, maybe they didn't have to register their cars until then. We know that the Hindmarsh Volunteer Fire Brigade had an Overland that was probably a 1913 car. The Merryweather, so down almost to the bottom, you've got the Tricar, the Merryweather and the SCAT. Now we know the Merryweather was built and purchased by the Fire Brigade in 1909. And it wasn't registered until 1913. We'd been previously making jokes, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we had the Fire Brigade car? We could paint our Speedster red, put SA, MFS on it or whatever, and call it a Chief's Fire car. We didn't believe that it was anything other than a car at this stage. So suddenly we had all the Fire Brigade vehicles registered on the same day. So next. And then shortly after we found this newspaper article along with this photograph. Now, this newspaper article was dated the 5th of January 1911, and it was the superintendent announcing the purchase of a 15 horsepower SCAT for use as a hose carrier. So not only did we suddenly think, well, maybe we have the Fire Brigade's vehicle, maybe it wasn't a car. So this photograph is actually, it's here, but it's an enlargement of a photograph we found in the State Library archives that was taken in 1911. And one of the things that you can actually see on that photograph is the brass surround around the scuttle. Now, in all of my research so far, I have not found another SCAT with a brass surround. And if you have a look here, we have quite a substantial brass surround on this scuttle. I keep doing things like that, don't worry. But the reason being that most SCAT cars were of a slightly higher end, luxury car with a bit of a sporty feel. I like to think that they were the Edwardian version of a Maserati. But this particular brass strip is on no other car that I have found. And every other SCAT that was built, if you discount the racers and the speedsters, had a windscreen. Now, there's no way you can fit a windscreen to that scuttle without creating a major vibration and failure point, I don't believe. So this was one of the big things with identifying maybe we really have got a fire truck here. Next slide. So if you have a look, the 2 top photographs are this vehicle. The bottom one is the wooden surround that was on a SCAT it's another 15 horsepower SCAT in New South Wales. So you can actually see there is quite a difference in the materials. Now, if you go to the next photo again, okay. So this was another photograph we found in the State Library. And this is the SCAT following the 1909 Merryweather down Wakefield Street. So we know this was taken prior to September 1913 because there's no number plates on it. But Whether it was staged or not, I really don't know. Maybe Josh can find that one out at some stage, but that's right. Okay, next, please. Okay, now, again, we've got more photographs of the brass surround, and if you have a look at the top photograph, 2 of those holes are not level. So they're actually, one is right in the very bottom edge, and the other one's up just slightly. And if you look at the photograph, this photograph was taken in 1917, in January. It was the opening of the Theberton fire station. And that is quite definitely the SCAT, and the headlights are mounted up really high. Now, I believe that those 2 holes that are showing on the brass surround there were for mounting the headlights up high. Now, again, I've never found any other SCAT with headlights mounted up there. They were all in front of the radiator where you would normally expect to find them. When I found this particular photograph, it was on the Retirees Association webpage. And it was about midnight when I found it. And I'm looking at this photograph going, gee, that looks like the other photographs I've seen of the SCAT. And I spent nearly 2 hours laying there with my computer on my lap in bed, looking at it, trying to work out if it was the same vehicle, because I couldn't work out why it would be at Theberton. Now, it turns out I did have in my collection of newspaper articles a mention of the opening of that fire station, and when they tested the alarms, both Adelaide and North Adelaide attended. They actually dropped everything and raced off to the Theberton fire station. So the next one, please. Now this is where I throw Josh under the bus here. We initially thought that the North Adelaide hose reel, because we had all the information. I've got at this stage over 100 news articles basically outlining the life of this vehicle in the fire brigade's tenure. And we thought that it had been retired by 1919 because the registration number, which was 3589, had been reassigned to a privately owned Model T in 1919. Josh actually sent me this photograph, and the email said, this is listed as the North Adelaide hose reel. It's dated 1933. We don't know if it's the SCAT or whether it's whatever replaced the SCAT. Can you help? Well, you can see the quality of the photograph. It's taken from one of the newspapers. In the end, I got to the point where I sort of said, I believe that it probably is the SCAT, but there was no way I could prove it at the time. Subsequently, we actually came up with the news article, didn't we? And so Josh actually sent me all of the witness statements, and there is no question that it was listed in the mechanics reports that it was the North Adelaide hose reel registration number 3589, which was this particular vehicle. Okay, so next one, please. So once we had extended the life of the car through at least until the 1930s, we went looking a bit further. This is a photograph of the Pageant of Progress. It's the South Australia's 100th birthday on the 22nd of December 1936, and there were 5 or 6 fire brigade appliances in that procession. Now, looking, you can see the statue there. There's a horse-drawn fire pump there. Immediately following that is the SCAT and the Merryweather again as well. We've got a total of 6 photos of the SCAT. 4 of them have the Merryweather in it as well. Now, we also found at this time a news article from the then Chief Officer, J.J. White, announcing that they were putting the SCAT, which had been recently retired, into this pageant. So in 1936, the fire brigade regarded this vehicle as historic enough to go in their, it was one of their entries in the procession. And you can see in this photograph, it's had the ladder removed, the lights have been removed from up on top. So it was quite obviously, it had been retired by then. I think J.J. White's comment when he took over the position early in 1936 he said that the appliances at Gawler and North Adelaide had chassis of the type you would expect to see in the annual veteran car run, and that was not good enough. So he started a modernisation process, which basically was the end of the service for the SCAT. So that's an enlargement, and you can see quite clearly the lights at this stage were down on the in front of the radiator where you would expect them to be. With the previous photograph at Theberton, what I didn't say was one of the things that we were looking at was the ladder mount. Now we've got 4 almost vertical holes on each side of this firewall, and they're sort of tilted in just a little bit. And looking at what's there and photographs and so on, the only thing I've been able to conclude is that that is actually the ladder mounts which go up above the driver and the passenger. So this was another, little bit to help with the identification, if you like. Somebody actually said that the fire brigade has not necessarily been all that good at, preserving their heritage and their information. This is actually the original ledger, the financial accounts from the State Archives, and it actually shows the purchase of the SCAT. So in November 1910, they paid a deposit of 7 shillings and 6pence with a balance of £450, which they paid at the end of January 1911. So that's what they would have got, just the chassis. So we know that the fire brigade's vehicle was sold by Murray Oranger in Franklin Street. Now we were already pretty sure that that was who supplied this car before we did that. And on the back up there is actually a side light, which is a Murray Oranger badged light. So it's not sort of its primary use, but we're planning on using that as a tail light, just because it sort of fits the history of the vehicle. Okay, next one, please. Right, now this is where we sort of get a little bit more technical, and we can sort of relate this to Darryl's talk as well, because as set out by the chief officer in 1911, one of the reasons that the fire brigade purchased a SCAT was because it also had a pneumatic starting system. So the differences with this one, it's also a patented system. We've actually got the original patent documents in French. Not a lot of use, but I have got a translation somewhere. So the differences, it had a very similar cylinder driven off the crank at the front of the engine. It's not currently there. We've got very little of it. You can see there is actually a handmade blanking plate where it would have been. Now, one of the differences, apart from how it operated, the SCAT one operated at 400 PSI rather than 150. So these were not only not necessarily reliable over the long term, they were also incredibly rough. They had a habit of shaking the engine to pieces, basically. So it is reported in one of the news articles that I've got that they were shipped from Manchester in England, and when they arrived in Adelaide, there was enough pressure still in the system to actually hit the starter and start the engine. So I thought that was pretty impressive. This system, rather than a tooth and a rack and pinion system, actually has a 4-way valve which sits on top of the engine. I think the next photo shows this. Driven off the crank, and it actually injects air into the cylinders. So in turn, each cylinder gets a burst of air, and it actually turns the engine over for starting. So I have the same issues. I have no idea about blow off or anything else. These are regarded as sort of so rough that there is only one known example still working in the world, and that's in Ireland. Okay, next one. So this is the patent document, and it's drawings of the actual valve system. That's the one in French. So yeah, if you really want to, I can supply the one in English. But. Okay, so we found all these little things that led us to believe that we had the North Adelaide fire reel. Everything we found, we could be explained by, yet the fire brigade could have done that. One of the odd things with this vehicle is the tyres. I was sort of hoping to have new tyres on it by the time we got it down here, but when I inquired about them, because of the size of them, I was told no, 12 weeks. So it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. No, not enough time. Most veteran cars seem to run 33 by sort of 3.5 inch tyres, from what I understand. These are 34 by 5, so they're actually 5 inches wide. So they are substantial tyres. And the distributor that I spoke to in Melbourne, when I gave him the size, said, that's the veteran equivalent of a light truck tyre. Now again, if you're carrying 1,000 feet of canvas hose and 6 burly firemen, I mean, yeah, I can understand why you'd want to put decent tyres on. A couple of the little things that we sort of couldn't quite get straight. Very early on, somebody said to me, that does not look like a SCAT front axle. And we had a look at photos of SCATs, and I tend to agree, the profile is not the same as any of the other SCAT front axles that I've found. So I went hunting, and I found an article about a crash in Bank Street at a fire in 1914. And it says there, the movements of the motor vehicle was of necessity restricted, and a reel collided with a stone curbing and an axle was broken. Now I have no proof that that is the SCAT, but we know that the SCAT was at that particular fire. I've got other documentary evidence of that. And the fact that it mentions motor vehicles and the broken axle in one sentence suggests to me that that is the same, that there's the connection there. And at this time, my understanding is there was only one motor reel owned by the fire brigade. So I don't think they had motorised reels until 1916 in the head station. Does that account? Would you?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. They had a few motors. There was the Merriweather. There was a ladder, a comma ladder, and I think a Dennis, but that was a pump. So there was no other reel at that time that was motorised. So it could have been one of the horse-drawn reels broken axle, but that's not the way I read that article. So suddenly we have a possibility for how we have a foreign front axle. The other thing was that came up, the 1933 crash that we saw the photo of earlier. The witness report from the police officer who was attending also said that the front axle was damaged. So we've got 2 accidents there that maybe could explain that. This is actually the advert from 1937 when they were selling off a whole heap of vehicles, including the SCAT. You can see that there. We really don't know what happened to it between 1937 and when we believe it ended up in a small garage in Hazelwood Park. So, yeah, excellent. So there aren't quite a number of South Australian fire appliances floating around. Josh is very keen to have them all in one place, I know. But, and this is some AI renderings. I was really just trying to get some idea of how the boxes might go on the running boards. And looking at the vehicle, I've just thrown together a body to sort of see how it might look, so that we can get measurements and build it properly. Now I believe that I've actually got the rear box too high, and the photographs that are there would tend to support that, because the rear box I think should only be the same height as the seat. So we're still juggling a little bit, but one of my jobs, once we've got over today, it's been here, you can sort of see what it might look like, is everything comes off it and we start pulling it apart to paint it and get the mechanicals sorted. So that's sort of what we're up to. This is just an aside. In 1926, the Advertiser did an article about Barney. Now, Barney was, at the time, a 43-year-old horse that was retired from the Wakefield Street station, fire station. All the other horses, I believe, were sold off, but Barney was retired to North Adelaide, and he lived in the stable next to the SCAT. And so you've got that, the fire alarm transforms him in an instant. Head erect, ears pricked up, and long tail swishing impatiently, he stands at attention, waiting for the orders that never come. He sees the familiar red and gold of the fire reel, then hears the throb of the engine, and the great machine disappears in a cloud of dust, leaving behind a faint odour of petrol. So we've sort of have decided that we're actually calling this vehicle Barney in honour of that particular horse and all the other horses that were replaced by the motors around this time. So these two photographs, I believe, were actually taken prior to the Interstate Firemen's Conference that was held in May 1911. And that basically is all of the fire appliances outside the Wakefield Street station. And you can see right in the front of the centre there is the SCAT, and that was before it had any of the fire extinguishers or the ladder or even the lights fitted. It's actually the same scene. The SCAT is right over on the far right hand side, almost cut out of the photo in the second one. And they are obviously two of the original photographs that we've got. Yeah, next one. Okay, so there's a lot of people that I need to thank for this. I want to thank actually Gary and the Sporting Car Club for allowing me to come and talk. And sort of my hope is to, one, raise awareness, but two, you just never know who might sort of suddenly go, oh, I know where there's a SCAT part. And it's like, ooh. I was talking to a club member, Michael Sheehan, only last week. He's the one who arranged for me to hire the trailer. And he said, I used to know where there was a SCAT motor sitting in a paddock. And I said, okay, I'm interested. He said, when I used to walk to school at Prospect Hill, he said there was a SCAT motor, and he remembered it because it actually has, you can see, it's got SCAT on the side of the motor. It was on 4 pedestals, 4 posts, being used as a saw bench. And he said, I'm sure it's not still there. And I said, no, actually, we know about that one, thank you. That's actually the one that's in the car. Because when my grandfather obtained this vehicle, the original engine block was so badly cracked, whether it was heavy use by the firemen, they're pretty rough people sometimes.
Nothing's fireman-proof.
Or whether it was the starting system running at 400 psi, I don't know. But basically, the engine block was the same one, and it's just you just never know who is going to know what it is. I mean, I keep referencing Josh here. He's a member of the Fire Brigade's Historical Society. I'm incredibly grateful for the support and the information that they've provided. There's lots of other people. I mean, even Daryl, with assistance, information, and what?
Even Daryl?
Yeah,
come on.
I'm just saying. And the floorboards that I've put in there were actually a piece of wood that he said, I was going to throw that away. Would you like it? Thank you. So no, I am incredibly grateful for the support that I've been receiving. And I mean, especially my family as well. They're tolerating what has quickly become quite an obsession. I have started a Facebook page and a YouTube channel. They probably won't work. It's useful. Oh, they should. So if you want to follow it, you can. There's nothing other than a couple of people learning what the hell they're doing with a brass era car, because it's not the first old car I've had, but I wouldn't say that I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination. The other interesting thing, while Daryl was talking, I might just throw these two. One of the possibilities for the front axle, I said that I think it's a foreign one. The Paynham Volunteer Fire Brigade actually had an all days and onions, and I'm not convinced that's not the axle out of that vehicle. If it was replaced in 1933 and not 1914, then there is a possibility, because at some point the Paynham Volunteer Fire Brigade was disbanded as the MFS was expanded. I don't know when that happened or what happened to that car, and the profile is sort of similar. So that is one possibility. There was something else
The fire.
that I came up with, but no, that's all
The
right.
fire
So,
that it attended.
thank you very much, sorry.
The fire that it attended.
Oh, that was the other one, thank you, yes. Daryl said that his body on his car was made by TJ Richards. One of the things that I confirmed only last week was that in 1924 there was a big fire at TJ Richards, and this particular vehicle did attend that fire. So yeah, it's just these little things all intertwine to make a story. I mean, at the moment I've got just over 200 newspaper articles that either talk about, you know, events that the SCAT was at, or, you know, imply. So a lot of those admittedly are duplicates, because at the time we had an awful lot of newspapers and they were all running the same stories. But I think we're about 65 confirmed fires that this vehicle attended within the Adelaide metropolitan area during its working life. So,
Questions
yeah, there are
from the floor?
Don't.
Everyone's
that was
gone quiet.
All right, well, thank you, everybody.